Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We come on the air, ladies and gentlemen, with another edition of the Dr. Sky Experience. We're proudly here on Talk Radio 77 WABC, the powerhouse of radio. Welcome to our Theater of the Mind, as we like to call it, on the many mysteries of the universe. And in tonight's adventure and episode, on our magical stage, we'll be talking about the story of prophecy, the mystery of Nostradamus, with our special guest, John Hogue, described by many as the American Nostradamus. Also, I'd like to thank our helmsmen, both Tony and Bill, for navigating, of course, this powerhouse signal to you, whether you're here in the United States, in other parts of the nation, 173 countries, as they say, and all 50 states, and I'm even confident, why not, way out into the cosmos. So we thank our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, for making sure that signal is as strong as you would expect. The contact number, as always, is 1-800-848-9222. 1-800-848-9222. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, another subject that we'll get into tonight is the night of Jupiter, the mighty giant planet of the solar system, the god of gods. This is Zeus in the magical world of Greek and Roman mythology, now closest to the earth right now, or I should say earlier this morning on the 10th of January, at 3:34 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The mighty planet Jupiter, 12 times the diameter of the Earth, some 393,368,000 miles away. And if you could travel at the speed of light, it would take you 35 minutes to get from the Earth to Jupiter, and the speed of light, just so you know in miles per hour, is 670 million miles an hour. We turn to another subject. What is prophecy? And a simple explanation or definition would be to predict that something will happen in the future. A brief bio of our special guest. John Hogue defines himself as a rogue scholar. He has traveled 3 times around the world studying meditation, disciplines, and reporting on new religious movements, cults, and compiling humankind in a new millennium. Considered the world's authority on Nostradamus and other prophetic traditions. Hogue is currently acclaimed for his ability to cut through the social, religious, and nationalistic projections of prophets and their interpreters to find threads of insight that they all share. A futurist, an accurate forecaster in his own right, creator of what some people call the Huffington Post of prophecy websites, his website, HogueProphecy.com. Hogue has received wide international recognition, appearing on over 100 television stations, 800 blogs, and talk radio stations on 5 continents, not only North and South America, Asia, Australia, and Europe. Let us welcome, as we move into the early morning of January 10, for most of us on the East Coast, and still the evening of the 9th, John, welcome to the Dr. Sky Experience. How are you?
I'm fine. It's great to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate you. And just to let the audience know, we do share a commonality, obviously, in our, exploration of the unknown from my side of the universe with astronomy and space, and yours, of course, about the great story of Nostradamus. Back when we were doing, of course, regular coast-to-coast programs, and, of course, meeting you and so many of the other, people out there, the guests at a coast-to-coast live event in Everett, Washington. That was an incredible experience. Lots of people there, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure we both did.
Yes, I love doing those shows in that old Everett Opera House. I used to be an opera singer, so it felt like home.
Well, that's amazing. And ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear a lot of things that John Hogue is going to bring forth here. But it's so fascinating. We get into this very interesting subject, as I mentioned just a few moments ago. Tonight we celebrate in the astronomical world the night of Jupiter, a most magnificent planet. And I wanted to add on that Jupiter and the Earth are in that alignment, 180 degrees. And also on the opposite side, if we go through the sun, both Venus and Mars in this incredible straight-line conjunction. And I'm sure you have lots to say from other aspects of what this might mean as we get into the whole prophecies of Nostradamus. Let's start off by talking about who Nostradamus really is from your research, because We've heard the name. Many people go, well, I heard that there's this guy that does all these predictions about the future and ... Take the ball from there.
Well, Steve, we'll start with when he was born. He was born in 1503, died in 1566. He was a physician, apothecary. He was in the high French Renaissance. He was definitely a Renaissance man. His time with prophecy was one of the smaller amounts of time that he spent. He was a doctor. He used to travel all over Europe, all over France, with a couple mules, and he was like a traveling doctor, apothecary. Rabelais was in his medical class when he was in Montpellier learning it in 1530. And anyway, he became best known, in fact, if he had never made a prediction, he would have been best known as one of the most significant plague doctors of the 16th century.
Interesting.
And some of his stories are quite amazing. When the outbreak of bubonic plague came in Provence, he lived in South France in Provence. And there was one time where he had to fight the plague for 270 days because all the doctors had run or died, and he had a couple of apothecaries working for him. And it's interesting that when I did my book, Nostradamus, A Life and Myth, which is actually the first full-body biography ever written by him, by anybody, that is, it was interesting to see how he kind of knew about germs, but it's not that surprising a thing, because people in the first century AD were talking about, well, maybe there's something so small it makes people sick that we can't see it. So, but he did end up writing this famous prophecy about it, where he said, the thing long ago forgotten shall be rediscovered by Pasteur. He will be considered a demigod figure, but by rumors as foul as passing wind, he will be dishonored. Now, he names, there's only 2 times in the prophecies when he uses the word Pasteur, and one was about the Pasteur of Rome, so that's not him. But it is very interesting because he says there's a great lunar cycle in that prophecy that will come to an end. So I had a little clue there. I could say, okay, astrological lunar cycles are there. So what was the big one that was going on then? Well, in 1535, there was a grand lunar cycle that ended in the year 1889. So I said, well, this is an opportunity. Is there anything a person named Pasteur did in 1889 that would bring up some of these little difficult details? Well, yes, Louis Pasteur created the Institut Pasteur in 1889. He's the man who created pasteurization. He's basically the man that started vaccinations and, proved without a doubt that germs are there. And then there's the interesting thing that the Encyclopedia Britannica of the time called him Pasteur the Demi-homme, the demigod. That was his... Interesting. Yeah. People called him that. And then, of course, the final line is about some terrible scandal. Well, in 1995, somebody had access to all of his notes and discovered that Louis Pasteur never used animals. He only used street urchins to test his things on.
Never knew that. Interesting.
Yeah.
But where a man comes up with the ability to look and project into the future... I mean, I gave a general, basic description of prophecy. And what? Someone to say or some to predict that something will happen in the future. And I'm not a person who studies the brain. I mean, obviously this is fascinating. So just to give our listeners, ladies and gentlemen, in case you're just joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience, a very interesting guest that I've known for years, and we're always trying to have him come on the show when he's doing that. John Hogue describes himself as a rogue scholar. His website is, of course, HogueProphecy.com. And your calls, ladies and gentlemen, with dialogue and critical thinking are always welcome here throughout the 2-hour show, 1-800-848-9222. So give it to us maybe from more the spiritual or way we don't even understand this whole prophecy thing. I mean, some people are gifted at this, they say. Some people, are born with this? What is it, in your estimation, that makes someone more of a prophet? I mean, this to me is fascinating.
Well, the first thing that has to happen, because it's such a subjective gift, is that a person that delves into it also has to be a prophet. That it's like you. Otherwise, I could be someone saying, "Well, I'm going to study the subjectivity of love, and because I'm objective, I'll never fall in love, so I'll be able to study it properly."
Wow.
You know?
I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that. It's subjective, totally subjective. If you don't have the gift, and it's in my family, the gift on both sides of the family, if you don't have it, you can't really write about it. You won't know. You can't write about love unless you've been in love. And you can't make prophecy books unless you are a prophet as well.
That's interesting. Tell us your background. I mean, when did this inspiration come to want to study this person? Because, again, I don't find much detail on this other than going to people like yourself. I mean, you could read about this on the Internet. When did you first get involved and enamored by the story of Nostradamus?
It started with the Cuban Missile Crisis, when I was in the final tender days of being 6 years old. And the 13 days of the missile crisis actually ended on my 7th birthday, on the 29th of October, 1963.
I'm glad we're all here, because look what if could have happened if, not coulda, woulda, shoulda, but imagine what might have happened in history if things didn't go the way they did. That's amazing.
Well, we actually, I would say, are in a period of time where we've done things in the last few years that exponentially or beyond anything that happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis, but I'll hold that for a moment and we'll get to
yes, I mean, this is interesting
because
what you're going to say.
What happened to me was, as a very young person, I became very aware of World War, nuclear war, and I could feel it. It was odd because my mother and father got tickets to go see John Kennedy at the Sands and Dean Martin's show. And
amazing.
So they were going to take this turboprop jet out of L.A., I'm born in Hollywood, and go there. And as a little kid, I suddenly started freaking out. I had this vision of a flaming jet engine in a field. And I was just like, and I managed to, my grandmother managed to call them and saying, "Will Mr. and Mrs. Hogue come to the office desk?" Okay. And so they had to convince me that everything's going to be all right. But I was just, internalizing. I was having a collective vision, like what happened to Jung when he almost went mad with these visions, which he finally understood were not about him. We always start making it personal. But these visions that Jung were having was happening around in 1913, 1914 with a lot of people, the coming of World War I. And when it happened, he realized that's what it was about. It's like all the people that had premonitions about the Titanic sinking. I talk about that in my book that you've been reading, Nostradamus, Premonitions of 911. Which looks at the whole journey that I took starting in 1983 to try to find out about what ended up being the Two Towers disaster of New York City. But we'll get to that in a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's okay. Please continue.
Yep. A lot of things here to unpack. So I became at 6, ending to becoming 7, very aware and interested in the world, wanting to know why the world almost destroyed itself. And so I began to read. At young age, I began to watch the news. And I wanted to know what this world was about. And I wanted to know because if it destroyed itself, I want to know why. If it didn't destroy itself, I want to know why.
Well, that's deep thinking, my friend. Absolutely.
I was a very serious child. Saturn and Scorpio, in the 12th house makes you rather serious. But fortunately, I kind of live by that song. I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now, is where I'm at now. But yeah, a very serious child, and I ended up voraciously reading about history, and I saw the patterns that were in history that kept repeating themselves. And then when I burned that out and couldn't find any more history to read, I started reading scriptures and religious histories and prophetic history, and I realized the patterns were in these. And I'm thinking, so the intriguing thing of what I've come to understand is unconsciousness is predictable. Intelligence is spontaneous and therefore not predictable.
Interesting.
And so there's prophecy works because people are predictable. And when they're in mass and mechanical behavior being predictable, one can see I don't know. I mean, I'm like the millipede in the Aesop's Fable theme. So, or it's like what my mentor Ray Bradbury used to do. He used to say, "Don't think, just write." And
stream of consciousness, right? Stream of consciousness.
Yeah, well, yeah. He had his tiki god at one time in his basement office, and he'd look up from the typewriter, and it was like glowering at him with this big brass thing saying, "Don't think." So he would do that for the first day. He said he used to write a short story every week. So he would start on Monday, and he says, "Don't think, put the left brain away, just whatever comes out, don't worry about it, just flood it. And then clean up the typewriter for the next 6 days." It's just like vomit all over the typewriter. That's what he said. So there's a quality of that in prophecy where don't think. Just really my skill, if there is any, is that I know how to do nothing. It was very much helped by the fact that I went to India. After I left my operatic career, I went to India and I ended up having a guru. And that guru was Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. And I was in the Oregon commune. I was there with the wild, wild country folk. But what I learned from Osho is the art of doing no-thingness. And then your body, mind, your emotions serve it. And so I've all these books I've written, all these thousands of essays and all, have come from a space of basically being that millipede that doesn't think about how he can move on 500 legs on either side of his body until some busy rabbit told him at Aesop's, "How do you do that?" And he went, "I don't know." And then he fell over and he couldn't get up. And
I have a question for you. I mean, you're described as the American Nostradamus by many others, and this is fascinating. But tell us in the short time before we go to the hard break here in about 5 or 6 minutes, and I want to get the audience involved here, 1-800-848-9222, and folks out there in, of course, the Theater of the Mind program, the Dr. Sky Experience. John is going to give us throughout this 2-hour show some of his predictions for 2026, and maybe you have some serious questions about the whole mysticism and the whole interesting side of prophecy. But before we go to that break, as we're coming downtown and on the clock here as we move toward the 30 mark, tell us some of the things that Nostradamus in his early days had this ability to predict, and what did he do, and describe it. They were written not necessarily just like you and I would write a simple thing in simple, whatever the language of the time in French. He did this in it's almost like a puzzle, if that's what we're calling it, in these quatrains. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Well, he confessed in the opening of his Le Prophetier, the prophecies of Nostradamus, which he is what's so famous all these years. Is he long story short, he was a channeler. I was quite surprised when I kind of pieced it all out in him.
Yeah, that's
he channeled entities from high planes down to daemons like Solomon the king, because he had the grimoires of Solomon that he used. He also used others from Iamblichus, and which have survived to this day, and he quotes them. And he basically modeled himself when he finally ended his travels and being rich himself, marrying a rich woman, widow, whose husband he couldn't save from the plague. They married. They started a family. He built this upstairs secret study and put a little observatory tower on one of the corners so he could look at the stars.
I like that.
And and he basically brought together all the magical instruments. A lot of them he got in Florence, back to South France, and he began his history of the future. And he did it because of his main motivation was the wars of religion that were coming. He saw that the king was going to die in an accident, a jousting accident. And so his motivation, because he was risking his life and his family's life. He's from a Jewish family that he was born into, a Christian Jewish family. And so he basically saw this then it ended up happening. The King Henry II was killed in a jousting accident, turned Europe upside down. And the tensions between Catholics and Huguenot Protestant French finally erupted. And all the things that he foresaw about the next 40 years of wars of religion, so many of his prophecies came true about that. And the strange thing that happened to him was, the most famous prophecy was when he foretold the death of the king, and that begins with, the young lion will overcome the old one on a field of combat, so it's ritual combat, in single battle, a joust. He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage, 2 wounds made one, then to die a cruel death. So, the young lion was a man 7 to 8 years younger than him, Gabriel Delorge of his Scottish Guard. He was 41. He was a tremendous athlete, one of the greatest jousters of the time. And on the field of combat, he did this in the Rue de Tournelle, where they put the sawdust down, they made the lists and everything, and they did it. The Delorge didn't lower his lance quick enough, and a huge javelin-sized splinter went crashing through the king's visor, gilded visor, the golden cage. And it pierced his eye and went deep into the brain. But the thing so that's the first wound. The second wound, which they found out after giving him autopsy, was that his brain was destroyed by the counter collision of the brain recoiling into the back of his head.
Sounds pretty graphic to me.
One.
It's amazing.
And he died slowly dying of infection from the brain being infected from all the slivers, and it was terrible, a terrible death. And so what happened is, here's the thing that he was trying to prevent from happening. He even went to the king and the queen, Catherine de Medici, and had a royal audience where he was asked about this, because she had an astrologer in Florence, she's Italian princess, who said similar things, Luke Gericus, that don't let him joust in 1559. It's not a good, he should not do that. So my sense is that Nostradamus, because he wrote an alternative future for Henry II, gave him the choices. If you stop jousting, you will maybe conquer Italy and bring Italy into the French Empire.
But it's amazing, John, that somebody can even, as we talk about Nostradamus, which many people out there may have mixed feelings about, but you're here to maybe correct some of those misinterpretations and also give us, in your opinion, so many other things. And it's so amazing, ladies and gentlemen, if you've heard the word Nostradamus, the name, of course, predicting what? The Challenger disaster, the Kennedy assassination, all these things, the 9/11 catastrophe, of course, which is so near and dear to so many people, a heartbreaking day in America and around the world, and so many other different things that we could talk about with our very special guest. If you're just joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience, John Hogue, you can visit his website, as we, of course, give out websites of all of our great guests, HogueProphecy.com. He and I have known each other for a number of years. We're getting to meet with him and you, ladies and gentlemen. Your questions and comments, always welcome. We like to ask that it be done in a simple dialogue with what we like is critical thinking. Your opinions, of course, are important. And that number is 1-800-848-9222. You can get in, of course, on this conversation. John will be kind enough in these particular hours, an hour and a half left on the Dr. Sky Experience, proud to be here on Talk Radio 77 WABC with some predictions for 2026 that are quite interesting. And as I mentioned, John, tonight a very special night, because we do on this program, we do talk about astronomy, space, aviation, weather. We talk about celebrity guests and many other different subjects that are important to ladies and gentlemen listening around the nation and around the world. But Jupiter, this is the night of Jupiter. So simply, if you go out and you're in dark skies, no matter where you're listening to 77 WABC, the object that's nearly overhead for the East Coast, if you have clear skies, is the mighty planet Jupiter. Why? Such a powerhouse. And in Greek and Roman mythology, we talk about this as the god of gods, Zeus, and so many other deity names that have been associated with this particular planet. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, to move through time and space, always great guests. And if you have guest suggestions, we can't guarantee that we'll get them all, but you as a listener, the email is for me, is just drsky@wabcradio.com. And while we're at it, why not listen to previous iterations of the Dr. Sky Experience at where? WABCRadio.com and RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. We'll be back with your questions and comments with our special guest talking about the mystery of Nostradamus. Who is he? John Hogue. We will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The year 1999, 7th month. From the sky will come a great king of terror to bring back to life the great king of the Mongols before and after Mars to reign by good luck. A quote from Nostradamus as we continue with our very special guest, John Hogue. He, of course, has spent a lifetime studying the amazing story of Nostradamus, and we're here, ladies and gentlemen, with you to answer your questions. Welcome back. You're proving to be very popular, as I would imagine, sir, in all forms of media. Let's go to the callers right now. They're very patient. Let's say good morning to Jim in upstate New York. Good morning, Jim. You're on with John Hogue. How are you doing this morning?
Good evening, John. Good, Dr. Sky and John. And pleasure to speak to both of you. I was an avid listener to Coast to Coast.
Thank you.
Art Bell was pioneer of theater, one of the pioneers of theater of the mind.
There you go.
I have a very minimal understanding of Nostradamus. I know some basics. But is there any prophecy with AI and demonic influence on AI? AI's got me very worried. And when Elon Musk was asked one time, what worries him? They didn't say anything about AI. He said AI and its potential to destroy the world.
Jim, you and I are alike. John, I think a very good opening question to our show this morning.
Absolutely. If you look at the things that are threatening our future, whether it's nuclear war, climate change, I've been saying for 30 years now that artificial enlightenment is what I call it, would be the greatest danger. And the first thing that comes up in my mind of Nostradamus saying something about it was something he said that seemed to be attributed to our modern times. He said, "Oh, what a loss of learning and letters will happen in those days, those future days." And he was horrified by it. It's interesting. I've been of late trying to what would you call it? It was I'm in this huge project. It would be my last testament on Nostradamus. It's about 3,000 pages and 4 volumes long. I'm going to start releasing the first volume in 28, and so I've been deeply in the last 5 months, deeply immersed for the first time, deeply into the artificial intelligent world, as I am trying to translate the larger body of Nostradamus' work that has not really been translated and interpreted. It's all of his almanac prophecies. So I've got every kind of AI thing going on here, along with my long time reading and studying 16th century French, Latin, and Greek, and all of that, which is a must if you do Nostradamus. And I'm amazed that the danger that I see is that I'm very educated in my topic. I've spent over 52 years studying Nostradamus, and since I got out of high school, and I'm 70 now. So it's long story short, we cannot surrender our education to the machine being our thinker and feeler.
Exactly. We don't want that.
Yeah, so when I get into this, it's almost like I feel like Solomon and with managing his grimoire with his demons. The algorithms are like demons, your daemons, they're lower astral creatures, and they constantly, the way they constantly break a good pattern of something that I've found by trying to, try this. They're all about just, try this. And if you don't know the subject, by studying it, by reading it, and by being with it, you'll be conned by everything that AI is making. I mean, isn't it amazing that even Elon Musk, even the people who have been very much a part of this, I mean, Musk said a very great prophecy about if it's not done right. He said, we'll be summoning the demon.
That's exactly right. But I want to go, John, to,
go ahead.
If we can go, Jim, tell us your concerns, because many people out there, we do other shows, as you've heard other guests on the Dr. Sky Experience, but it's important to hear what you really think about the problematic thing of AI. Tell us in your words.
Just how it has we're such a computer-driven world, how it has the power to take that over, our nuclear program. I was watching one program where this person let AI go on its own, and it started out very friendly, and it kept going, and then it got dark. It was blaspheming God. I was listening to a podcast with a Catholic exorcist, and he said there's high-tech, super high-tech guys in Silicon Valley that hold, like, seances to conjure aliens to help them make their AI more powerful than other people's AI.
Like a digital Ouija board, right? There you go. Like
that. And, we're trying to put guardrails on our AI, but the Chinese have no guardrails. You know what I mean? They're racing to beat our AI, and it's just, to me, like I said, I think about not words and letters. We have that now. I have teenage girls. All they want to do is be on their phone. You can't get, even myself, I find it, I'm an avid reader. I find it hard to find the focus to read anymore, because I'll go to my phone or my iPad, want to check this, want to check that. It consumes your world.
I agree. There needs to be a kill switch on some of that stuff. But Jim, thank you for being part of this. I hope John has given you some insight into this. I know the story we could do for 3 hours or more on the particular subject, but thanks for being part of our experience, the Dr. Sky Experience. Hope you'll call again. John, that's fascinating because, we talk about this. There's other guests that we've had that talk about how this can get out of the box. And what did they say? Ray Kurzweil, I guess, in many of his books. I read The Spiritual Age of Machines a long time ago, and now the Singularity books, which he says, of course, is nearer. What's your opinion about when you think this whole transformation will happen, when singularity occurs? There's many different dates. What say you, John, on that? I know you've done a lot of research on it.
The problem is we have, from my mystical path in India and stuff, is that basically we have a fascination with the machine because the way most of them have been programmed by our societies are basically mechanical. And so it's a Dr. Frankenstein problem. Frankenstein wants to make something in his own image, but his image was flawed by ego and pride, and so now we're doing it in a collective level. It is so the only thing that's going to be an antidote for this is people becoming. Well, it's in the future. Here's a prediction, a long-distance future prediction that we're going to struggle with for the next 100 years. Okay. Science has only one wing, and it's the objective wing. It's marvelous at discovering and relating these things, but science, skira, to know, is going to be the foundation of the Aquarian Age, or we will not be here to see it. It needs the wing where the scientist knows himself, like Socrates used to say. And that requires a science, it's not a religion, it's a science of self-observation. It has the same adherence to the scientific discipline, but it's applied in meditation. And the Eastern meditations are far more advanced in this, where you become a witness to you as the experiment, you as the hypothesis that has to be understood. And then
you mentioned before that you studied under a guru. Yeah. That's a fascinating story because I look at it. I have no knowledge like you do, of course, not the experience, and many people out there may have had it. But look at some of the things, if you go back into the Indian philosophy, it almost seems apparent to me after reading a couple of books that they might have even, when they talk about a carpet that could fly, who knows? Maybe they had the answer in a metaphysical way of anti-gravity. Who knows? It's just so fascinating about the world that we think we know and the world that we do not know. And that's why we're appreciative.
Steve, the dark sky in Sanskrit is Akash, Akasha. And in Sanskrit, it means the heavenly library.
Wow.
And Nostradamus called it the Godhead, the seventh stage, where everything is happening, has happened, and will happen in the exact eternal present. And if we could tap this, I'm writing a book about how people in the future will tap this. How we'll use cellular memory, almost got that word out, to actually use our cell memory to actually see what life did to the very beginning on this
Interesting.
planet.
And not to be negative, I know in the later part, maybe in hour number 2, talking about what you're not putting words in your mouth, but the potential is we're moving to a sixth extinction for many reasons, whether it be climate in some people's opinions or other things. Fascinating stuff here. And ladies and gentlemen, if we haven't gotten to Tommy in Bridgeport, obviously Max in Manhattan, and you, the mystery caller, that would be at 1-800-848-9222. We'll do our very best, as always, to get you on the air. And you have an opportunity not only to ask questions, to get into this dialogue with your critical thinking, but we are trying to give everybody the second opportunity to respond after our guests fill us in on many of these mysteries of the universe. But I find it fascinating. So when we come back with You're Okay, I'd like to get into a little bit more discussion of something that I find fascinating, your book, Nostradamus, Premonitions of 9/11. When was that written again, so everybody can understand? And we'll save the details, of course, to when we come back. But when did you write that? Because it has so many pertinent relationships to things of world events in the last maybe 50 years?
I wrote it in 2016.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do that, ladies and gentlemen, this coming break right here as we move on with the Dr. Sky Experience. Always great guest, as you tell us. The email for me, if you'd like to correspond, is just drsky@wabcradio.com. We'll be right back here on the Dr. Sky Experience with your questions and comments as we move into the great mysteries that are out there, whether they be in the science of astronomy, space, aviation, who knows. Beyond that, the story of Nostradamus with our very special guest, John Hogue. We will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
There will be great loss of learning before the moon's full cycle is completed. Fire and floods will be fomented by ignorant rulers. Much time will go by before it is finally rectified. Another quote from Nostradamus as we continue, ladies and gentlemen, 46 minutes after the hour, with you and our very special guest, John Hogue. His website, HogueProphecy.com. Let's continue with the callers. We appreciate their time and patience. Good morning, Tommy in Bridgeport. You are on the air. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I have a couple of questions. One, do you know how Nostradamus got his name and why he had to call himself Nostradamus? And another question with the Temple of Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man, and he built the temple for the Lord with demons. Now, is that temple clean? How can you have the throne of God in a temple built by demons?
Powerful questions from Tommy in Bridgeport. Go ahead, John. You're on.
Yeah, great questions, Tommy. First off, Notre Dame in 16th century French and Old French, people would say when they were going to the cathedral, Our Lady, that's what it means, they would say, I'm going to Our Lady, and that means they're going to pray. So his family actually were called Our Lady, as in the Virgin Mary. And so that's where that comes from. Now, if you study Hebrew lore, I mean, for one example, that Russell Crowe playing Noah in that movie had so much rich Hebraic lore in it that's not in the Bible that really made it a remarkable story. My favorite telling of the Noah's Ark story. We have this. Solomon was given power by the Lord to use sometimes lower astral people, but if you look at Jewish lore, there's a lot more complexity to the story than is in the Bible. So I'm thinking it goes around those lines. Of course, he would not use them for anything that would be tainted of sacredness. I mean, he's Solomon. He wouldn't do that. But Solomon was a great magician, blessed by the Lord to do these things. And I've read his grimoires, and a lot of people in Nostradamus' time, if they were doing magic, it would be like this. You know, the astral plane has lower astral spirits in it. They're either stuck, they're in between life and death, or in limbo, or things like that, and that's where that kind of work happens.
Tommy in Bridgeport, you get the last word here. Fascinating conversation, don't you think? This is very interesting.
Yes, it is, sir. Well, that's what I want to say, because Nostradamus was Jewish. He had to change his name to a Christian way, okay, in France, or else he would not be able to practice what he did. And do you know what anti-Semitic means? It's when in Sumeria, when Abraham had his clan, they were called the Semites. It was a small group from the Sumerians. And that's why they say today anti-Semitic. You know, when you say anti-Jewish, right? Do you know that?
Yes,
you know that?
I do. And also, it's something that people ought to know is that when somebody says, "Oh, you're an anti-Semite," to me, and I say, well, if you were hurting and killing Semitic people, isn't that making you an anti-Semite? And they say, yes. I said, well, then, and this was a Zionist who was asking me this, I said, then why are you killing the Palestinian Semites? They are your cousin brothers. You're both from the same source of Abraham. The Arab people are cousins to you. So, you know, this attempt to try to control that word, to just have a one-sided dimension to it, is something I'm constantly trying to educate people, especially these days.
Tommy in Bridgeport, thanks for being part of the show. I appreciate your concise questions here. Very interesting. I'm learning something too, John, from the callers, as we always do here. Let's continue with the callers to the top of the hour. Let's say good morning to Max in Manhattan. Good morning, Max. How are you doing? Thanks for your patience.
Good morning, Mr. Hogue and Dr. Sky. I have two questions, if I may.
Yes.
If you're aware, we are approaching the year 6000, which means we're approaching the Messianic era in about 215 years.
Yes.
We have end times prophecies believed by the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. In our regular, I think, Gregorian calendar, we're going to be approaching it in 2239 as it leads into 2240 in September. So, what can you tell us about Nostradamus having read through this subject, and what were his predictions?
Great questions, Max.
Well, yes. I mean, God, there's so many. We could do a whole show on this. There's so many things that are going on now, and that's why the Messianic fever is growing, not seen since the first century A.D. And one of the things is that, yes, we're in another couple centuries, we're going to see whether the third temple is actually going to be sprouting in our hearts, or it's literally coming down according to anticipations of different Jewish circles. The other thing that's happening is that we're coming up to what should be the second millennium, not 2000. Because it's one thing to be born as the potential of Christ. It is the 2000th anniversary of the passion and ministry of Christ, which is coming in less than 8 years. I think it's 2033. That's the real turn of the millennium.
Wow. Max, your closing comment. We always give everybody at least a fair shake at responding back, and you have the floor.
You mentioned that Nostradamus was born to a Christian and Jewish family. I wasn't aware of this. Maybe you can clarify what that means? Oh, sure.
The king of Provence, which was a very enlightened king, was René the Good, they called him. And when his son died, and when he passed, the lineage of Provence, which was his own kingdom, became part of the French kingdom, and the king of that time was quite anti-Jewish. And so he told the Jews of Provence, you have two choices. You leave, or you convert. And the family of Nostradamus, like many people. I mean, I have Jewish heritage, and I am not officially Jewish, but I have Jewish heritage in my genetics. So a lot of the people, the tribes, that's why so many of the tribes disappeared from the knowledge of Judaism and all, because they made decisions to survive. They loved Provence, and so, in a way, Nostradamus always retained his Jewish mysticism. But being a Catholic, I think he got the idea of being a Catholic with a little c, that is the Church Universal, where Judaism is part of the universal mystery of God.
Yeah, it's interesting. Max, appreciate you and everybody who's calling. I think it's very insightful. They're bringing up some very interesting things. We all learn something, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, myself as host and our special guest always bring us to the table here. And we do appreciate you. And thanks, Max. Hope you'll join us again for another Dr. Sky experience. I know the clock's going to run out here for hour number 1, but give us a little tease, because I want to get into this in hour number 2. Your book, Nostradamus, Premonitions of 9/11. Give us a little bit in about 4 minutes or so before we go to that break, because this is fascinating, and it relates, ladies and gentlemen, to what our special guest, John Hogue, is saying, how these particular predictions that Nostradamus has made, and even what John's interpretations are, how important they are to recent world events. Please give us the tease on this. This is fascinating.
Well, I can thank Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller for being on one of the few documentaries on Nostradamus called Nostradamus 500 Years that I wasn't on. But he inspired the book because he laid a challenge. He said, basically, if you did foresee this coming, all you people who are prophets, and if you didn't say something even the day before it happened, it was, in so many words, criminal act. And so I thought, well, I'm taking up that challenge. And so this book is my story from 1983 to September 10th, a premonition before 9/11, of basically being a sleuth sayer. That is, a sleuth, a detective, a precog detective trying to track down, in a Philip K. Dick style, for all these years, who what would cause this crime of hollow mountains in the great new city at latitude 45 being struck from the sky, and even the year dated in a word in a word code, and so as it's a story of how a person who does this work has to drop certain conditionings. Like, first it was all kind of related to the Cold War, but then when the Cold War ended, there was more to it. And then when terrorists tried to take down the two towers in 1993, that kind of changed the evolution of it. I learned that as you get closer to the actual event, it becomes clearer and clearer what it's about. And so it's quite, I documented all the things that I wrote from 1983 and all the evolutions of this, my discussions with my colleague and good friend, the late Hans Holzer in Riverside, New York, about all this. It's amazing because all of his psychics were seeing this thing coming again after 1993, and he was saying, should we leave New York? And I said, then my voice changed, and it came out of me. I was witnessing it like him. I said, no, don't leave New York City or Manhattan Island. But don't go to the Battery. It is doomed.
Yeah, wow. No, I mean, God bless. I mean, I had lived out here in Arizona at that time, but so many of my friends and family members, of course, and everybody listening who experienced that horrific day, not only in New York City, but the other locations where the terrorists had struck. Just amazing how somebody like a Nostradamus could have even put this all together. But in about a minute or so, and I know that's not fair to you, the way he writes, it's basically in what? These things called, how do you describe and define a quatrain? And I hope I'm pronouncing that correct.
It's a 4-line verse, quad 4. And there was also something attributed called the Sixians in Nostradamus. Those are fraudulent. That's 6 lines. So, yeah, it's just simply a 4-line poem. He wrote in a poetic fury. It is one of the biggest struggles of all people who do this, and most, even the good authors, don't get over the point is they're projecting on clouds. His nebulous verses. It takes a lot of work to catch yourself doing it.
No, it's amazing. It's like a Rubik's Cube of words, and you have to be the way to, obviously he wrote in that particular way, so that there'd be a way to unravel this, but it wasn't just as simple as writing a sentence in his native language. Fascinating stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, hour number 2 is approaching, and we appreciate you. And ladies and gentlemen, your questions and comments, we see the caller line lighting up here. We'll get to everybody as quickly as we can in hour number 2. And if you're still interested to get involved in the conversation, 1-800-848-9222 on a show that talks about the many mysteries in the universe. And we're doing that about the story of Nostradamus with John Hogue. And he'll be right back with us here on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience here on the Powerhouse radio station, Talk Radio 77 WABC. Welcome to our Theater of the Mind, as we like to call it, on the many mysteries of the universe. And tonight's adventure on our magical stage is the story of prophecy and the mystery of Nostradamus, with our special guest, John Hogue, described by many as the American Nostradamus. You can get in on the conversation with your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. I like to call John Hogue a polymath, a Renaissance man. And with that said, thanks for being here. This is an exciting adventure deep into the story of Nostradamus. John, let's continue with the callers. We always want to give fair opportunities for people who've been patient. Let's say good morning to Bob in Yonkers, if you're there, Bob. Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Dr. Sky.
Thank you.
I'd like to know, is any chance in the future we could be meeting with alien race publicly in this country?
Well, powerful stuff, John. What do you think?
You know, there are a lot of interesting things in Nostradamus that could be forecasts. He called them angels, and he talked about these dog people and, you know, and other things that are really have kind of a UFO extraterrestrial nature. And then one of his most famous prophecies is about the end of the world in 3797 AD, when for some reason the sun expands into a red giant. And even though he was an astronomer himself in those days, he gets the mass right. He said the Earth would be devoured. It would go right up to the orbit of Earth. And that's exactly the mass of a white dwarf, a yellow dwarf becoming a red giant. But then he said everything will be utterly destroyed on the Earth, but the races of Earth will continue. Some will go to Aquarius, and others will go to Cancer. First time he's talking about these places not as constellations, but as destinations.
Wow.
And the people that go to Cancer will live in time perpetuel, which means, I interpret that to mean, you know, when we get free of being just one planet, we will become a galactic civilization, and that means it will be very hard to destroy us when some rock, like the dinosaurs.
You know, Bob, I'm like you. I hope that, you know, with all this government conversation going on, testimonies, you know, people testifying, I just hope we find the real truth of this. What say you? It's been too long and too much evidence, I think, that shows that there really is such a thing as extraterrestrial visitation. Bob, you get the final word on the whole thing?
Well, I'd like to know, is it true at Area 51 in Las Vegas area, are they holding bodies from Roswell?
No, we've heard that, right, John? I mean, I used to have conversations, as you and I both know, on Coast, that we had many, many people talking about that, including Art, I guess. So, I don't know, Bob, but John, your thoughts on this? It's very fascinating.
I've been saying for 20, 30 years that the 2020s, which I call the roaring 2020s, would probably be the time when things would start really speeding up in people kind of getting used to the reality that we have extraterrestrial life. One of the ways that it could happen is that I think they would prefer us to discover them rather than force themselves upon us. That's one thing I believe. And the other thing is that I was predicting that telescope people would start making new kinds of telescopes where they're literally saying, well, why don't we look for things that we know exist in our world, like solar panels or pollution or artificial light, and see if we start seeing that as we keep discovering more and more planets. But the other thing that could happen, too, is that there's been last year was pretty remarkable in a lot of things getting close to the mark about this. And I wouldn't be surprised, one of my predictions for the latter half, I always said the latter half of the 2020s would have amazing, amazing changes. I mean, epochal changes, and one of them would be an acceptance of this happening. But Arthur C. Clarke said that once people know for sure, without a doubt, that that there are other forces and lives out there, it will change our society. It will change our religious views. It could bring us all together.
Well, we need that, don't you think? That's the big understatement of the year. Why can't we all just get along? But Bob, closing out on this, my own experiences, I've been there to Area 51, and not to say this proudly, I've been almost removed from there. This is going back 20-some years, when obviously the big intensity was what's going on behind that Freedom Ridge. And that's another story for another show, John, and for Bob. But here's the deal. Robert Lazar is somebody that people should look up. Bob, look up Robert Lazar. His claims are that he actually worked on these particular extraterrestrial craft that were in an area called S4, in a part of that area called the Papoose Lake. And then it even gets even more bizarre, Bob. I know, John, you may know this, that there's actually been, and this one almost sounds comical, but maybe it's not, that there was an actual extraterrestrial that lived out there called J-Rod. And if you look that up, Bob, that'll fill your night and morning. Thanks for being with us, Bob. Appreciate your questions. They're always interesting. Let's say good morning to Frank in the great state of Maine, the Stephen King location. Good morning. You've been patient, and Happy New Year, Frank. I haven't talked to you in a while.
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Always a pleasure. And yes, it's a beautiful cold night up here in the state of Maine.
Wow.
But yeah, very, very cold, but very beautiful. My question is kind of like a devil's advocate type of question or comment. There were some detractors to Nostradamus' writings. I mean, Hister and the 45th Parallel, and there were some people who said that he either had a parasite in his brain, I've seen that one time, or because of the unsanitary conditions of his time, there was something going on that made his balance distorted where he was making up these stories. Now, I read about Aleister Crowley, and he was a known drug addict. He was a known drug user. So my question is, how can you tell the real psychics, the real premonitionists from the detractors and the fakes, or the people that don't have the ability, but yet get it through other means like other substances?
Boy, you bring up some fascinating thing there, Frank, about real fact or fiction, who's believable or not. John, that's fascinating.
Well, yes. First, a little bit about Latitude 45, because it's kind of come up in what we're talking about. That's about the great new city that Nostradamus saw, and you got to understand, it helps. A lot of people have detractive things to say about that, but like, he didn't get the latitude right. It's more around 40-41. But we forget you have to get beyond your modern day bias. Me, everybody. When you go into the past, we usually project our own times upon the past. I had to drop all of that and see the future and the present as they saw it then. And then you find out that one of the reasons why latitudes existed but were off is that they didn't have longitudes, which came 200 years later, to balance them out better in calculations. So with that in mind, with that 16th century problem and challenge to solve in mind, I had to say, well, if it's latitude 45 for this great new city, we'll include that, but, we've got to look in a wider vein of the variance of the latitude. So because it has to be a great new metropolis that did not exist at all in his time, the only one that matches that is New York City, called the New City by him.
Yeah. Frank, that's fascinating stuff. Please continue. I mean, we appreciate your commentary here.
No, it answers my question perfectly, because I know that in Nostradamus' time, things were not exactly like we are now. Like you go to that 45th parallel, and I'm going to go to, again, him mentioning Hister instead of Hitler. And you knew that the pronunciations were not exactly going to be precise, but of course you're always going to have detractors to these people, and I'm totally into Nostradamus's readings as I am to anybody else who predicts like Jane Dixon or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I remember your issue about Hister, though. I'd really because it's a fascinating subject. Again, Hister. You have to go back into 16th century mindset to find out that Hister is actually the name of the Danube River.
Correct.
And it's applied sometimes in those ways, but it was H-I Gothic S-T-E-R. And it's one of the three famous anagrams trying to name the three antichrists that Nostradamus saw.
Correct.
He saw Paul-Noir, which is Paul Ne Oleron in an anagram, and it means Napoleonic king, actually using the Corsican dialect of French. It used to be called Napoleone Bonaparte. Then he made it more Frenchified and to Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, there are 5 quatrains that talk about Hister, but it's in the regards of a man who had a crooked cross as his symbol, who was called Captain of Greater Germany, who would create, break and make treaties in 37, 40, 41, and finally 45. And these are where a lot of his treaties happened. He broke a treaty with the Soviets in 41, invaded the Soviet Union, called Operation Barbarossa. Barb and Barbarian Barbarossa comes up a lot in his prophecies related to Malta, which was a key battleground in the Mediterranean, happening at the same time as he was invading the Borysthenes, the Russian world.
Frank, always good to hear from you, and Happy New Year. I never got to say that to you and all the people out there as we move now into the 10th day. It's amazing how fast time will fly. Hopefully you'll continue with us, Frank, in future programs of the Dr. Sky Experience. You know, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I know you and I talked off air, that the fascination that Nostradamus had with roses, that's something beautiful, an interesting story right there, a most beautiful, magnificent flower. But it's also interesting that I ask you this question in talking about latitudes. Is there any truth to this? I heard this on some other radio shows years ago. There's some kind of mystical significance to the 32nd parallel, north latitude, such as like Baghdad, Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm broadcasting from. And when Frank was saying before that it's bitterly cold up in Maine, hey, guess what, folks, in the New York metro area, you're at 48 degrees and we're now to 41. So what a reversal of temperature. But the reason I'm mentioning that, talk a little bit more about this particular story, because I find this whole thing very fascinating. Did you ever hear anything about this correlation of something in world history? Events happen at the 32nd parallel, or the 32nd latitude, in the North Hemisphere.
Well, the problem with that is that if you're seeking, the question is that people have to remember. Most people misuse the word skeptical. Mm-hmm. I always go back to the original meaning the Greeks give to it, which means to investigate. But notice, there's crickets after that. There's no qualification, just to investigate. Not that it's true, that it's false, that, I feel a bit skeptical about this, which a lot of people do. And what I say when I'm in that mood is I say I'm not being skeptical here. I'm being cynical. Because I'm aware that I have an opinion that this is wrong before I'm even looking at it. So I admit it. But most people use skepticism that way. And, of course, there's always a danger, and certainly you learn it studying Nostradamus. I'll give you an example. There are 2 kinds of Nostradamus scholars, the blind believers and the blind debunkers. I won't mention names, but okay. But the thing I will say is one famous Nostradamus used to say, Nostradamus always gets it right. And another who was a very famous skeptic used to say, Nostradamus always gets it wrong.
Wow.
And all I can say about that is, well, to the skeptic, well, you can't deny that Nostradamus had one prophecy that he got right. He said, when I'm dead, I will be far more famous than I ever was when I was alive.
And here we are this morning with you, John Hogue.
Yeah. And
Time and space, ladies and gentlemen, moves us on to Tom in New Jersey. He's been patient. Good morning, Tom. You're on with John Hogue. Okay, let's go to Alexi in Queens. Good morning, Alexi. How you doing this early morning?
Good morning, Dr. Sky, and to your guest, I say good morning. And gentlemen, with no disrespect to you or your guest or your belief, but here is the story. The information of the future and predictions and reporting of history is rife, R-I-F-E, rife with errors. The Bible itself is a 3,300-year-old document. It has been revised so many times, we have no true idea what in God's name was going on and what the philosophy behind it was. And you go up to the age of the printing press, the Gutenberg, about 1500. You have your documents that were all handwritten and thoroughly corrected. They had no whiteout in the days of the monks.
You're right on that, Alexi. They didn't have any whiteout.
They would simply grab another scroll and start over and come up and say, I meant to say this. No, I meant to change it and say that.
Yes, agreed. Right. They had no idea of advanced computers and AI. But is this right, John? I mean, not to cut Alexi off, that many of these books in those days, weren't they then, literally somebody the spoken word was then done right there and put into whatever hard tablet or whatever printing they could do. It wasn't that they gave a manuscript beforehand, right? It was done almost verbally, right? Translated
down. Speaking of Nostradamus, one of the reasons why we almost have all of his vast work surviving the times, roughness on documents and all, is that he was a person born during the printing revolution. And he was one of the first major bestsellers of books on almanacs, on weather, because it was a little ice age, so almanacs really got involved. And then his other books that he wrote, and of course his famous Book of Prophecies, which has been read for 4.7 centuries now. Few people on the planet have that distinction. But it's mainly because he was actually part of the modern, the Renaissance, which became, the beginning of modern times, and they had printing presses, and so a lot of his work survived because of that. It makes it much easier. Yeah. But the thing is, I always wonder, why then didn't somebody write a full-body biography? Because there's all the material is there. I mean, you can't find that for Copernicus or anybody else of the same time. And then I realized halfway through my first draft why. You can't separate Nostradamus' reality from his myth. So my biography got the new title, Nostradamus, A Life and Myth. And it also looks at all the rich ways myth can be flim-flam, the lowest meaning, to a perennial truth that's beyond fact.
So, Alexi, could your consensus that we're hearing sound like this in summary, that due to the inaccuracies of the day and the long period of time and the big revisions, that maybe that affects, in your opinion, am I correct, that the accuracy of these predictions is less credible to you based on what you just said? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, in a way it is, but you have to realize that if you are touting the ability to predict the future, there are certain things certainly that even a fool could predict. But the point of it is that to hold it up as a single individual who came up with vague statements or myths or guesswork and may be right on 1 out of 500 different cases. Yeah, I guess so.
Have you read Nostradamus?
I wouldn't waste my time because I know I have
time if you haven't read it. This is not a scholar's way of doing it. I read everything. I mean, how do you explain Louis Pasteur? How do you explain these things? And for you to see, I have read Nostradamus for 50 years.
Have you viewed the original document?
There's a lot more to it than that, sir.
Gentlemen, okay. Let me say this to keep it civil. That's interesting, Alexei. Look, we respect your opinions on this, but in all due respect to the audience out there, we want to move forward with different callers. But no, it's a good point to bring up. Everybody's entitled to an opinion here, but I do appreciate you, Alexei, as always. You know, you're always a regular caller to the Dr. Sky Experience. Here's something interesting, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back in just, moments from the next hard break here, what we want to talk about with you, this is interesting because I followed you and done some research in depth on this particular, for this particular episode. I want to talk with you in specifics. Maybe you can tease us a little bit about this. Some of the things that are going to happen in your mind is where you see from Nostradamus' perspective. You talk about we're entering into a most important years, the roaring 20s, and you have a lot to say about that. So start off with what these interpretations in your words and Nostradamus mean for us as we move forward in time.
Well, I've been making predictions as part of having to do work with prophecy. You have to see when you're right, when you're wrong, and try to understand how either one happened. And so what I sense about this, first off, numerologically, this is a 10-year. It's a year of finishing, completions. Some completions are positive, others are not. And the world is in a tremendous period in this next 12 months of either completing our issue with finances in this country or seeing an end of economy as we know it, either completing and understanding the structural decline of our democracy, or finding now a new beginning that does not have democracy in it. So it's an either or. It's quite an important year, and we are going. In fact, just a day or two ago, the very things I said would happen happened with the Oreshnik being launched to make European leaders understand where Russia really is and where their borderlines can't be crossed. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it will bring a new beginning of sobriety to our world leaders, which seems to be so lacking.
Well, and we're on the precipice of, not to scare the audience, people out there are intelligent and they have opinions, but if you look at the world situation, it's just my opinion, we're so close to somebody chucking a nuclear weapon at somebody out there with the constant threats, and little things, right, John, could trigger off things like that. Like you said before, you studied the entire thing of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And a guest we had a long time ago said this, and I'll be very brief before we go to that break, that if that particular Russian submarine, which apparently was sitting in our, destroyers and aircraft carriers were sitting up above, it could have been a lot different story if that particular captain on board that submarine did not stand down, because the Kremlin they couldn't talk to. That could have changed the entire world history. But it seems like it just takes a little bit of something going offline to maybe start, hopefully cooler heads will prevail. But that bothers me. What say you on it?
I know it was the last day of the Cuban Missile Crisis, my birthday. Yeah. Even after everything was agreed upon, it could have blown up because of that incident. And it's because of that commissar who talked down the Soviet captain who was, they were running out of oxygen because the batteries were dying and they were keeping them down in the water. So he said, no, let's just go to the surface because we're not thinking straight.
Well, John, we'll continue with you on the other side of the hard break. But there was a nuclear-tipped torpedo there, and that could have changed. I probably wouldn't be here as a New York person when I was a boy, New York City, and so many people around the world. All it takes
is just like the movie, the Bedford incident,
Absolutely. I watched that and thought that was a great movie. More with our special guest, John Hogue. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, you rule the callers, 1-800-848-9222. More with John on predictions that he has and stories that I think will open your mind about some very interesting things that he sees in the near future. More on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city. two great rocks will war for a long time. The word's translation is from Nostradamus a long time ago. John Hogue is our special guest at the top of hour number 2, and we appreciate him and his contribution to our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue with the callers. Let's go to Martin in upstate New York. Good morning. Your questions, comments, as we appreciate you. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Sky.
Yes, sir.
And I have a question for John Hogue. The planet, there's a planet they say called Nemesis, and it's some kind of planet that drifts around randomly through the solar system. It seems to me something that can't be, but on the other hand, they don't tell us everything, like about the UFOs, they don't tell us everything. So where did this idea come from of a planet Nemesis?
Well, let me just jump in here. Nemesis would be considered a star that has a rogue orbit, but Nibiru would be the alleged planet. But, John, continue. You may have much more insight into this.
Well, I'm looking at what happened with Three-Eye Atlas, and I know that some people were theorizing that it might have been a long shard from a iron core of an exploded planet, so
sure.
If that's true, then maybe, planets that have been cast out of their solar systems, there must be some. I mean, it's one of my favorite science fiction films was When Worlds Collide.
Oh, I love it. I'd love to be talking about that in the future.
I met him, the producer. He showed me all of his paintings for the second time machine that never happened. It was really quite remarkable.
Was that George Powell? I guess
George Powell, yeah.
George Powell, yeah.
Screwball Army George.
Wow. See, this guy's got a lot of experience, folks. And if you haven't seen that movie, give it to us again, because it's kind of a classic.
Yeah. When Worlds Collide. I am going to be writing essays on when movies become prophecy. And there's so many that have been, by accident or by innocence, have become great prophetic works. And
save me a seat for Kubrick's epic 2001: A Space Odyssey. I do programs here. We call them a Dr. Sky Film Festival. And we get people to join us here. And we almost had Keir Delea to join us on the video screen. Obviously, I met him once. But more important than this, those great sci-fi movies are just incredible. But Martin, are we even getting close to answering you on this? Because truly, nobody has identified either of those objects that we're talking about from the astronomical world. The Nemesis star may be way out there, billions of miles, and the Nibiru planet, I don't know. I've talked to these astronomers with the giant telescopes. They haven't found one. But what do you say, Martin? I mean, are we answering you, or we're just confusing everybody? I guess Martin's gone. Oh, he hung up. Martin hung up already. Well, we tried. Let's go to Joe in New Jersey. You're on with John Hogue. Good morning. Thanks for your patience.
Doctor, excellent show, excellent topic tonight.
Thank you.
I want to ask John if you would elaborate more on Nostradamus' comments on the Antichrist.
Amazing.
He said there were three. He mentioned previously when Frank called that there were 3 Antichrists. If you would elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yes. The first was Paul Ne Laurent, which is an anagram of Napoleon Roy. That means R-O-Y, as it was spelled in Old French, R-O-I, Roy, king. So King Napoleon. Remarkable prophecies about him. Seeing Waterloo, seeing the French army dying in the white country of Russia, all that was in he was very lucid prophecies. The second is Hister. Now, Hister is an interesting code because Hister is the Easter with a silent H in some languages, and it's the Danube. Where was Adolf Hitler experiencing his formative years? In Linz, Austria. I've read Mein Kampf. I hold my nose, but I read it, and I've read and studied him a lot because of. In fact, I'm even looking at a book looking at his own prophecies, which are quite remarkable, but in kind of a dark prophetic way. And he's so. Like I was saying before, there's 5 quatrains that talk about him dealing with great armies, being called captain of Greater Germany. The sign of the crooked cross was his sign, the Hakenkreuz. And also, because Nostradamus is Jewish, one of the most amazing prophecies is where he calls him Barbarossa, which is the emperor of Barbarossa from the medieval times, which he codenamed his invasion of the Soviet Union. There's a lot of mentions of Russia in the prophecies, and I guess that's why I'm the only non-Russian Nostradamian that people read a lot in Russia. But anyway, those are the first two. The third is called Mabus, M-A-B-U-S. He comes at a time, long story short, that he dies at a time when the world of animals and people is in upheaval and climate disruptions and stuff. So there's a lot of things that show that he might be our contemporary. Now, I was talking earlier about thiokol and the rare use of Nostradamus dropping vowels. Well, if you look at Mabus, and I've written a book about the Mabus prophecies, the Nostradamus and the Antichrist, codenamed Mabus. And like the other book, you can find these at Amazon as books and ebooks. We have a certain figure in the world called MBS. And it is interesting to me because all the prophecies of Nostradamus seem to point to a Middle Eastern figure being the third and final Antichrist. And so, here's a person that everybody calls MBS is the current crown prince and future king of Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Mohammed bin Salman.
Yeah.
His name, now in my book on Nostradamus and the Antichrist, I look at all the ways in which Mabus can be decoded. It's quite a study of anagrammatical decoding. And he decodes all of that. All of his names go into Mabus in Roman and Latin letters. But here's the interesting thing that I'm struggling with. He's less a Hitler and more a Napoleon. Somebody who is not just abjectly evil, but a complicated character that sometimes does evil, as most political leaders and presidents and kings do. But he's more like Napoleon. He's also a visionary. He wants to, like Napoleon wanted to modernize France and revolutionize things. He also has a lot of similar traits. So he's more a gray area if he is indeed this third and final Antichrist. And one has to also play in the prophecies with Nostradamus' biases. He was a Islamophobe, very big one, because 16th century was the high water of the Ottoman Empire trying to conquer a divided Christendom.
Right, and he fought against that and spoke so much, about that in many of the things that you've described. But Joe, how are we doing on this response? Because I'm fascinated by listening to this.
I'm fascinated too. I'm like a little sponge here.
Yeah, it's amazing. But your final thoughts on this as we move on through time and space.
I just wanted to say, in the summertime, I was listening to a late-night TV show, radio show, and the host asked they had a nationally known psychic on the show, and he asked the psychic, what can you tell us about the Antichrist? And the psychic said, he's here, he's present on the earth with us. And then he said, what can you tell us about him? And he said, I can only tell you this, he's in his 30s and he has black hair.
Wow.
And he said that, does he, then the host was kind of stunned, and he said, does he know he's the Antichrist? He said, if he doesn't know yet, he'll know soon.
Amazing. Wow.
Well, Nostradamus called Mabus the young dark man of evil doing. Bin Salman became the crown prince and very influential, helping his sick father when he was 34.
So let me throw this out to you, John. Maybe it's not to put you under the bus here, but who, if there's anybody out there, other than what you've said about in Saudi Arabia, is there any other candidate that what Joe's describing from your research maybe even has an idea of a name that you'd be willing to tell us? I mean, that's kind of a tough one to answer, but you got a shot at it.
Yeah, well, my general direction has been in the book Nostradamus and the Antichrist, codenamed Mabus, kind of shows that I just did it in a detective way. Everything seemed to fit to decode Mabus into all kinds of different Arabic names. And so I kind of feel like the other thing too to understand is a lot of great religious leaders are called anti-Christ or anti-Buddhist or anti-Hindu. Mm-hmm. Even the Sanhedrin probably looked at Yeshua, who's misnamed Jesus because his real name is Joshua. That name came later, and when Christianity was Romanized. Every great new thinker or religious leader that revolutionizes consciousness is always viewed like the Sanhedrin viewed Jesus, like the Brahmins viewed Buddha. And isn't it not a surprise that almost all the great founders of religions like Zoroaster was stabbed, Buddha was poisoned, Muhammad was poisoned, Jesus was crucified, and so on and so forth.
And Gandhi met a sad fate, too, right?
He's killed by a fellow Hindu.
That's incredible. Joe, I appreciate you, and thanks for bringing up a very interesting subject about the number 666 and how that relates to modern times here. We appreciate you, Joe. And folks, if we haven't gotten to Gregory in New Jersey, Lamar in North Philadelphia, and you, ladies and gentlemen, at 1-800-848-9222, you are on the Dr. Sky Experience, and we will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, we continue with the Dr. Sky Experience here. And we'll continue, of course. You've been patient on the line here. Let's say good morning to Gregory in New Jersey. You're on with John Hogue. How are you this morning?
Good morning. A comment for you, Doc, and a question for Mr. Hogue.
Yes, sir.
Let's go back in time a little bit. Robert Knight had a great program on WBAI called Earthwatch.
Yes.
And I worked in evenings for many decades, and I used to love hearing your part of his program. And that led to an event that took place in August of 1991 in High Point, New Jersey. Do you remember that?
Yes, I sure do. Wow. You're being very kind from the time machine, Gregory, yes, that's actually interesting. And not to put the audience to sleep about me, I appreciate the comment. But Robert Knight passed way on, too early onto the infinite, and it was amazing being on with him for 30 years, I guess, Gregory. That's what we did. And joining up with High Point, New Jersey, at the big monument up there. That was our night sky place. So we appreciate you mentioning that.
There were hundreds of our neighbors there, all from northwestern New Jersey, in fact, the whole metropolitan area. And I've seen a lot of science stuff through my decades. You were such a virtuoso just with a flashlight, flashing on stuff into the sky with the asteroid. All I can say is, thank you a third of the century later. That was amazing.
Wow. That's amazing, my friend. We bring the powerful laser there. And we did have, not to continue to be on a soapbox, but Gregory, we had 5,000 people there in April of 1986 for Halley's Comet. We had people of all different ethnic groups, all different religions, all different persuasions. And actually, we got in trouble because we only supposedly had to have 100 or 200 people, but 5,000 came in big buses. So that was an amazing event. But please continue with John Hogue. I appreciate your commentary.
Well, people still pass High Point. They go, that's where Dr. Sky. Remember that? Yeah, man.
It's fun.
I
miss it.
That was 30 years. That was an incredible time.
Well, come out to Arizona because we do the big Dolly Steamboat cruise on a canyon lake there. It's beautiful. And a night dinner, we have a dinner cruise. But that's at dollysteamboat.com for people who may want to know. But please continue with John.
And you can't go to a New Jersey diner after in Arizona. Come on, Doc,
Hey, I missed that. Oh, we don't have diners out here, really. So there you go.
There you go. So Robert, are we at the end of 250 years of America beginning
with
John.
The revolution? No, you're talking with John.
John. Sorry. Yeah.
No problem.
Also, if you're familiar with the Eastern Orthodox Church, there's a couple of saints now who are being talked about the end of the world. Elder Paisos of the Holy Mountain of Athos, and a couple other recently canonized folks. I have to ask you, in relation to that, there's a Tibetan, some type of scroll or whatever that's talking about the potential end of things in 2030 if we don't come to our senses. You guys know anything about that? And any comments about the saints in the Eastern Church, especially with what's going on in that part of the world?
Appreciate your questions and comments, Gregory. Thank you.
Yes, it's the Eastern Church is, I think, in some ways, the great split that happened between the Latin Church and the Eastern Church came from, well, at least the Eastern Church believed was that the Latin Church was changing things. And one of the things that I admire about Eastern Orthodox Christianity, it's just my opinion, it just feels closer to the origin than the Western Church does to me. And I also like the way the Eastern Church is not trying to tell God what to fulfill as prophecies. It just trusts that God will fulfill and do whatever he needs, and I feel often that, this is just my view, that Eastern Orthodox Christians that I meet are just trying to live how Christ would live, rather than try to change the world and create what I call in one of my chapters in my Messiah. I wrote a coffee table book looking at all the Messianic traditions of the world, and about 37 of them. And I just liked how the thing that you run into is that every East-West native, doesn't matter, everybody thinks their religion has the truth and all the others do not. But what if the pattern of that is really saying, maybe none of you have the full picture of things because of all this, we're the best and everybody isn't. Now, some are polite. The Buddhists are polite about it. The Christians are right out there with it.
Well, I hate to cut you guys short, but Gregory, God bless. Those are wonderful comments about the questions, and I appreciate you from the memories, and hope you'll be part of our show as time moves forward. Thank you so much. Have a good morning. John, we're coming up to the end of the show here in just a moment in time and space. So let's say good morning to Lamar in North Philadelphia. You're on with John Hogue. How you doing up there?
Well, good evening, gentlemen. I was at one time a part of the protection team for His Serene Highness Prince Robert von Bronco von Kaiserschwelle, 74th Grand Master of the Knights of Malta Order of St. John, and I recall vividly at their compound, his family members, surviving family members, had portraits rather prominently displayed of their ancestor, His Serene Highness Prince Robert, with various members of the royal houses of Europe. There was one with His Serene Highness, with the late King Peter and Queen Alexandra of Yugoslavia, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, the Rey Juan Carlos and Queen Sophia of Spain. As you know, Queen Sophia, though Queen of Spain, was Greek in origin, and they also claimed kinship with none others, no less an entity than the ill-fated Romanov family. In any case, at the soirees that they had, which were many and quite opulent, one of their favorite evening topics was these so-called wise men. However, they seemed to be more interested in men like Rasputin and the infamous Count Cagliostro. What is the guest assessment of the seeing so-called abilities of Cagliostro and Rasputin? And my follow-up question is this. What need do we have of these mortal men, these so-called wise men, when we have the one true source book of all wisdom and knowledge that tells us what was, what is, and what is to come? The Holy Bible.
This is powerful stuff. You know, John, before you answer, I'd love Lamar to do the opening act of any DVD or documentary that I would do, and maybe you too, but continue, please. Lamar, that's powerful stuff in your voice there. I love it. Continue, John.
Let's see, where to enter into this? As I was just saying, I've been all over the world, and I've heard very sincere people, as sincere as the telephone person, say with such certitude that, well, the Dhammapada of Buddha is it, or the Quran is all, and it's interesting how all of them share such a total embrace of what they believe, but they're all saying it, that they're the one. And I just wonder if what has to come in the world is where we live it. And, it's also true that we all have a divine spark in us. And I think ego can get very sophisticated, especially when it gets tied to religion. What I mean is identification comes from the word idios in ancient Greek, which means two things. The Greek always has the obvious definition and the hidden silent definition. The obvious definition is under a belief that I am separate from the world, separate from God, separate from the source. But it also means, it's where we get the word idiosyncratis, ideology. It means idiot. And Gurdjieff, a great Christian mystic of the 20th century, George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, used to reverently call his disciples, if they were talking to them collectively, he'd say, you idiots go dig a hole over there, and you idiots will make dinner tonight. and he meant it he meant it reverently, and then I realized idios is not a bad word. It is our state of being. I am an idiot. All of you are idiots. We are under the illusion, shared idiocy, that we are separate from the divine. That's why the number 666 actually means those human beings living, forgetting their divine source. It means.
Lamar, I wish I had more time and wish we did, but if you're going to get in earlier in the conversation with the shows, we'd certainly like to give you more opportunity to respond to. John, it's the end of the show, but not the end of the line here. I'd love to do this again with you again. We only scratched the surface on some subject matter. Hopefully it's informative to everyone out there. John's website, once again, is HogueProphecy.com. He talks about these particular subjects, the history of Nostradamus, the predictions. You can learn so much more. And I do appreciate it, John. I mean, this is interesting. You and I met at the stage, the Everett Theater. And that was interesting to be on stage there with other illustrious guests that brought some interesting conversation to the table there. And I do hope we'll do this again. So thank you so much for your time and really enjoyed it. And you have a good morning and a peaceful 2026 to each and every one of you out there and to you, John. Thank you for your time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up the show. Don't forget, we call this the night of Jupiter. So if you're out in dark skies and it's clear, the cold shouldn't bother you. It's freezing here in Phoenix, and it is also cold in New York and everywhere in between. The mighty object that you see that's nearly overhead for a good portion of the country right now, the mighty planet Jupiter, closest to the Earth right now for the entire year, a little over 393 million miles away. And tomorrow, as we continue with the Dr. Sky Experience, we'll talk with great aviation authors about the great sacrifice many young people made flying B-17s, and a space update with our very special guest, who, of course, Rob will be talking about what's happening with the story of what's happening on the International Space Station. They'll be bringing back a number of the crew to a yet undisclosed medical condition, something that hasn't been done in quite a long time, if not the first time. And thanks to our helmsmen, both Tony and Bill, for navigating the signal.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to The Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.